The Blue Boar Inn glowed with lamplight. Chairs scraped. Voices overlapped. The air carried the smell of roast beef mixed with polished wood. It was not a grand affair. Yet the villagers treated the charity auction as if it were a London sale. Tables at the front were covered in lots: silver goblets, old books, a watercolor of the church tower, even a moth-eaten officer's cap from the last war. Lady Bantry presided, rings sparkling, gown too rich for the inn's small room. She waved to friends as if running a theatre stage. Dolly never forgets to be dramatic, Miss Marple thought, needles clicking softly in her lap. Miss Marple had chosen a modest seat near the side wall, not too close, not too distant, a perfect place to watch. Her eyes rested briefly on the goblets. One gleamed brighter than the rest, so polished it almost seemed new. Curious. Lucy Denham hurried past, hair loose, arms full of catalogue sheets. She tripped, nearly sending the papers flying. "Sorry, Miss Marple," she whispered, cheeks pink. Always eager, always flustered. Miss Marple smiled kindly, though her gaze followed Lucy's papers. The typed list was neat, but 2 lots bore faint pencil marks, tiny crosses. She noted it, said nothing. At the back, Inspector Slack stood with arms folded, already impatient. He disliked social gatherings. He disliked auctions even more. Yet duty required his presence, since outsiders were in the village tonight. The outsider was Mr. Alistair Grant, a tall man, grey-haired, stiff posture, retired magistrate, collector of antiques, and more than once that evening boaster of his superior knowledge. He spoke loudly, correcting small details, making others laugh uneasily. "Mrs." Ellison muttered to Lady Bantry. "The man enjoys ordering people about. Some habits never leave." Lady Bantry gave a wicked grin. "Better for bidding. He'll pay more than anyone else." The auctioneer tapped his gavel. "Lot 1, the silver goblets." A ripple of excitement passed through the room. Purses opened. Hands twitched. Miss Marple set her knitting aside for a moment. She leaned forward, studying the goblets again. The one in the center, gleaming unnaturally, caught the light too fiercely, as if it had been handled differently from the rest. The bidding began. Voices overlapped. "Mr." Grant raised his hand without hesitation. The goblets were his. He collected them with a satisfied smile, brushing away Lucy's attempt to wrap them carefully. Lady Bantry clapped her hands. "Now, friends, a toast to begin our evening properly." Glasses filled. Wine poured. Miss Marple watched closely as Mr. Grant lifted his goblet. He stood, cleared his throat. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, raising the silver high, "to truth and to the past we must never forget." The room hushed. All eyes fixed on Mr. Grant as he stood tall with his silver goblet. His voice carried, practiced from years on the bench. "To truth," he repeated, "and to the past we must never forget." A polite murmur rose. Glasses lifted. Some smiled, others shifted uneasily. Miss Marple's needles rested quietly in her lap. She studied faces instead of the toast. Evelyn Pryor, tidy as ever, raised her glass but drank only a sip. Lucy Denham, eager as always, held hers with both hands, eyes darting nervously toward the table of lots. Dr. Haydock sniffed, skeptical. Lady Bantry rolled her eyes but drank deeply. Mr. Grant swallowed half his wine in a single motion. "Fine claret," he declared loudly. He seemed almost triumphant, as though even a sip of wine could be proof of authority. Lady Bantry leaned toward Miss Marple. "He does rather enjoy the sound of his own voice." Marple smiled faintly, but her eyes were elsewhere. She noticed Lady Bantry's hesitation. Just before drinking, Dolly had frowned, lifted her glass to the light, then shrugged and taken only a small sip. Curious. At the back, Inspector Slack muttered, "Lot of fuss over nothing. Give me beer any day." His disdain filled the room more than the wine. Grant continued, "I have studied your village records. I have found errors, distortions." He paused, surveying the company with relish. "Tonight, I intend to correct them." A stir ran through the crowd. Mrs. Ellison stiffened. Evelyn Pryor's pencil tapped against her program. Lucy dropped her catalogue sheets, cheeks flushed. Miss Marple's gaze returned to Grant's goblet. The silver caught the lamplight, oddly same as before. The polish gleamed too bright, as if it had been handled differently. Grant lifted it again. The truth, he declared, even if uncomfortable, must be faced. He drained the remainder. The inn fell silent. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then a strange sound escaped his throat. A rough cough, followed by a strangled gasp. Grant's hand tightened around the goblet. His face turned grey, lips trembling. The goblet slipped, clattered against the table, and rolled to the floor. Lucy screamed. Mrs. Ellison rose, reaching forward in alarm. Lady Bantry clutched her pearls, eyes wide. Dr. Haydock shoved through the crowd, already pulling gloves from his pocket. "Stand aside." But it was too late. Mr. Grant swayed, knees buckled and collapsed against the auctioneer's table. Wine splattered, spreading across the neat programs like spilled ink. Miss Marple did not move. She watched his lips faintly stained green as the life left his face. For a moment, no one moved. The sound of the goblet rolling across the floor echoed louder than any voice. Then the room burst into confusion. Lucy shrieked, clutching at her papers. Evelyn Pryor dropped her pencil, face pale. Lady Bantry pressed both hands to her chest. The auctioneer stammered, gavel forgotten. "Doctor," someone cried. "Fetch the doctor." Dr. Haydock was already kneeling beside Grant's body. His hands moved quickly, checking pulse, loosening collar, pressing against chest. His frown deepened. "Nothing," he muttered. "Not a chance." Inspector Slack pushed forward, his tone sharp. "Clear space. Give him air, will you?" But his face betrayed irritation more than concern. Miss Marple had not risen. She remained seated, quiet, eyes fixed on the fallen man. She noticed the glass stain on the tablecloth where Grant's wine had spilled. Around the edge, a faint ring darker than the rest, almost oily. Lady Bantry leaned close. "Jane, he's dead, isn't he?" Miss Marple's needles clicked softly in her lap. "Yes, my dear, and not by accident." Slack overheard. "Nonsense. Man was old, heart gave out. Shock of excitement. Too much wine. Happens every week." But Dr. Haydock shook his head grimly. "Heart? No, look here." He tilted Grant's chin. His lips showed a faint greenish hue, almost metallic. "Poison. I'll stake my practice on it." Gasps spread through the room. "Mrs." Ellison whispered. "Poison? Here? At the inn?" Lucy backed against the wall, nearly in tears. "But I cleaned everything. Every glass, every plate." Slack scowled. "And still you missed something. Careless work, girl." Miss Marple's eyes narrowed slightly. "Not carelessness, Inspector. Deliberate substitution." She rose at last, moving with slow purpose to the table of auction lots. She touched the edge of the cloth near where Grant's goblet had stood. Her fingers lifted a tiny flake of residue. She examined it calmly. "Unusual," she murmured. Haydock leaned closer. "What is it?" "Powder, I think. Not from wine." Something brushed along the rim, not mixed within. Slack barked. "Speculation." The man tripped over his own arrogance, that's all. But Marple was no longer listening. She followed the trail of spilled wine across the table. It had spread to one of Evelyn Pryor's catalogue sheets. The ink smudged, but beneath it a faint pencil cross remained visible. She folded her hands, knitting now forgotten. The room buzzed with panic, yet her thoughts were steady. Her eyes lifted toward the missing goblet. "The question," she said softly, "is who prepared that glass, and why?" The panic ebbed into uneasy silence. Chairs scraped. People whispered. Inspector Slack barked orders that no one obeyed. Miss Marple moved toward the auction table. Slowly, calmly. She touched nothing, yet her eyes took in every detail. The silver goblet stood in a neat row, or almost neat. A space gaped in the center where one should have been. She bent slightly, studying the tablecloth. The outline of a round base showed in dust. The missing goblet had stood there until moments ago. Now it was gone. "Lucy," she said gently. "You were polishing earlier, were you not?" Lucy Denham clutched her apron nervously. "Yes, Miss Marple. Every piece. I cleaned them twice. They shone like new." Miss Marple smiled faintly. "Indeed, too much shine, perhaps." She ran her fingers lightly over the cloth. A faint smear caught the lamplight. Powder again. White, almost crystalline. Dr. Haydock leaned closer. "Strange," he muttered. "Not ordinary dust." Inspector Slack grumbled. "You two see ghosts everywhere. A goblet rolled under the table, that's all." Marple glanced down. The floor was bare. Nothing glinted in the shadows. Evelyn Pryor hurried forward, trying to cover the table with her program sheets. "We mustn't disturb the lots. Everything must remain orderly for the accounts." Her voice trembled. "Orderly, yes," Miss Marple said softly. "Though I notice your hand shakes, Miss Pryor. A rare occurrence for such a precise secretary." Evelyn stiffened, but said nothing. Lady Bantry fanned herself with her catalogue. "Jane, what do you suppose? That someone spirited a goblet away in plain sight?" Miss Marple's eyes twinkled. "It would not be the first time, Dolly. A crowded room hides many hands." Lucy interjected. "But the goblets, Mr. Grant won them. They were his. He even drank from one. Perhaps someone removed the others for safety." Marple tilted her head. "Then why not all, my dear? Why only the one?" Dr. Haydock rubbed his chin. "Unless that single goblet was different from the rest." Slack snorted. "Rubbish. Silver is silver." But Marple did not argue. She reached for Lucy's polishing cloth, still lying on a chair. She lifted it delicately. Fine dust coated its folds too much for silver alone. She rubbed it gently between her fingers. Smooth. Powdery. "Not tarnish," Lucy gasped. "I don't understand. I cleaned until my hands ached. There shouldn't be dust left at all." "Unless," Marple murmured. "Dust was added afterwards." The innkeeper shuffled forward, uneasy. "No one touched that table but the committee, I swear it." "Committee," Lady Bantry repeated with emphasis. "That narrows it, doesn't it?" A murmur spread among the guests. Eyes turned toward Evelyn, then to Colin Lyle, the schoolmaster, standing pale near the door. His hands fidgeted, chalk stains visible on his cuff. Miss Marple folded the cloth neatly and laid it back down. Her needles clicked once, then stilled. "The missing goblet," she said quietly, "is the key. And someone here knows exactly where it has gone." The room did not settle. It shifted instead into clusters of whispers. Every face seemed to lean toward another, every voice lowered but urgent. Miss Marple resumed her seat, knitting needles faintly clicking. She let the murmur flow around her like ripples in a pond. Villagers always revealed more in whispers than in statements. Lady Bantry leaned close to Mrs. Ellison. "He was about to say something about records, wasn't he? Did you hear?" "Mrs." Ellison's mouth tightened. "Grant never kept his opinions to himself. My late husband had dealings with him once. Interfered in business that wasn't his. Always believed he was. The only honest man in the room." Two men at the back muttered about land deeds. Grant had pressed for an inquiry years ago. The memory still soured. "Enemies," Miss Marple thought quietly, "do not vanish with time. They wait." Lucy Denham hovered nervously at the edge of a group. "It must have been an accident. Or a mistake. Perhaps he had an allergy." The others shook their heads. Too much certainty in Dr. Haydock's tone. "Poison," he had said. Poison left no doubt. Evelyn Pryor folded her program again and again, paper edges fraying. She tried to appear calm, but her hands betrayed her. Marple noticed. Precision secretaries did not crumple paper, not unless fear unbalanced them. Inspector Slack strode through the whispers, heavy steps stamping authority. "Enough chatter. Man died. Doctor says poison. I'll find who did it. Best keep your tongue still." His words had the opposite effect. The whispers grew louder once he passed. Lady Bantry sighed dramatically. So many faces hiding secrets. I almost enjoy it. Miss Marple gave her a mild look. "Murder is never enjoyable, Dolly. But human nature does reveal itself most clearly when pressed. At the bar, the innkeeper muttered to his wife. The wine bottle came from the cellar untouched. Only the committee had access. Committee again, Marple noted silently. Dr. Haydock rejoined her, wiping his hands. Nothing to be done. Instant. Some alkaloid, perhaps. Clever choice. Clever, Marple echoed. Her needles clicked once, twice. Her eyes rested again on Evelyn's frayed program. The auctioneer, pale but determined, cleared his throat. Should we continue? No, Inspector Slack barked. No more sales tonight. This is an inquiry now. The villagers muttered agreement. Some edged toward the door, but no one dared leave. Curiosity was stronger than fear. Miss Marple lifted her knitting and smiled gently. Yes, Dolly. Quite a performance. Yet, not theatre. Lady Bantry shivered. Then who played the villain? Marple's eyes drifted back to Evelyn's trembling hands. Perhaps, she thought. The playbill is already marked. Inspector Slack planted himself at the center of the room. Hands on hips, voice booming. Enough of this gossip. A man dropped dead. Shocking, yes, but not mysterious. Heart, stomach, or nerves, take your pick. Murmurs spread. Dr. Haydock shook his head firmly. No, Inspector. Not heart. Poison. I told you already. Slack waved him off. Poison. Always poison with you, Doctor. Villagers frighten easily. One cough, one stumble, and they scream murder. I've seen it all before. Miss Marple folded her knitting neatly in her lap. She said nothing. Her eyes rested instead on the table where the wine bottle stood half empty. Slack pointed to it. Look there. Wine too strong for an old fellow. Upset his stomach. That's all. Case closed. But the bottle troubled Marple. The cork lying beside it looked wrong. Too neat. Too clean. She rose and stepped closer. Jane, Lady Bantry whispered, tugging at her sleeve. You're not going to... Hush, Dolly. Miss Marple picked up the cork between two fingers. She turned it slowly. The surface showed tiny scratches, not from a corkscrew but from a knife. Dr. Haydock joined her. Well spotted, he murmured. That's been tampered with. Slack snorted. Nonsense. Old corks crumble. Knives help loosen them. Perfectly ordinary. But Miss Marple examined further. Curious. This cork is whole, yet the bottle half empty. So much poured before the toast. Strange, don't you think? Lucy Denham gasped. I saw Evelyn carrying the bottle earlier. She said she was helping the innkeeper. Evelyn stiffened. Only to save time, there was much to arrange. Slack cut across them, voice sharp. Helping, tidying, pouring, it proves nothing. No one here murdered anyone. Miss Marple's eyes returned to the cork. She held it to the light. Along one side, faint letters scratched shallowly. Initials, perhaps. A.G. Dr. Haydock frowned. Grant's own initials. Lady Bantry leaned closer, whispering with relish. Marked for him. Oh, Jane, how deliciously wicked. Slack snapped. Coincidence. Some people scratch initials for decoration. You can't weave a noose out of scratches. Miss Marple replaced the cork gently. Her tone was mild, almost grandmotherly. Perhaps. Yet deliberate marks, deliberate polish, deliberate missing goblet, these things rarely happen by accident. The room stilled. Even the whispers fell away. Slack barked again, louder. I'll not have this turned into theatre. Until evidence proves otherwise, the death is natural, and that is my word. Miss Marple smiled faintly, resumed her knitting, and said nothing more. But her eyes lingered on the bottle, and on Evelyn Pryor, whose fingers would not stop twisting her torn program. Marple thought quietly. If this was natural, why mark the cork at all? The villagers had begun to settle again, though uneasily. Some whispered, some stared at the floor. Others kept glancing toward the half-empty bottle. Miss Marple rose once more. She bent carefully to the table, her eyes sharp behind their mild expression. The cork she had examined lay where she had placed it. But beside the bottle, half hidden by a folded napkin, lay another. She lifted it delicately. 2 corks. The room stirred as she held them side by side. One bore the faint knife scratches, marked with initials. The other looked plain, yet darker with wine stain, edges swollen as if truly drawn from the bottle. Dr. Haydock leaned close. Good heavens, one belongs, the other does not, Inspector Slack growled. Trick of the eye. One cork, two pieces. Happens often. Miss Marple shook her head gently. No, Inspector. 2 whole corks, one genuine, one counterfeit. Lady. Bantry clapped her hands softly in delight. Jane, you do make life exciting. Miss Marple ignored her. She studied the plain cork. The staining seemed uneven. Along one edge it was paler, as though soaked briefly, then dried in haste. A false cover. Someone, she murmured, prepared a bottle in advance, switched corks, presented it as unopened. The mark on the false cork guided the glass to a single man. Gasps echoed. Evelyn Pryor stepped forward. Her voice wavered. That's absurd. Who would go to such trouble? For a village auction? Miss Marple's needles clicked once in her hand. Murderers often go to trouble, Miss Pryor. More often than not. Lucy Denham wrung her hands. But who handled the wine? I only saw it when Evelyn brought it from the bar. The innkeeper flushed. A misunderstanding. I passed it to her, yes, but it was sealed. I swear it was sealed. Marple glanced back at the duplicate corks. Sealed, yet swapped. That meant private access before the toast. Her eyes drifted toward Colin Lyle. He stood stiff, hands folded behind his back, gaze fixed on the floor. His cuff still bore faint grey dust. Chalk? Or something else? Mr. Lyle, Marple said gently. You teach science, do you not? Chemistry, physics. Such knowledge must prove useful. His head jerked up. You suggest I poisoned a man? Nonsense. I never touched the bottle. Slack barked. He's right, Miss Marple. We can't hang suspicion on dust and corks. But Dr. Haydock's voice cut through. She may be right. Look, this false cork, lighter than the real one. Hollowed, perhaps. Perfect hiding place for powder. The room buzzed again. Suspicions leapt from one face to another. Evelyn pale, Lucy trembling, Lyle rigid. Miss Marple folded her hands calmly. So much effort for one glass. A counterfeit cork, initials carved. Someone planned carefully long before tonight. Her gaze lingered on the 2 corks. The question is, who had? The patience and the need. The auction table still stood in disorder. Glasses overturned, wine staining the cloth. 2 corks laid side by side like silent witnesses. Miss Marple adjusted her spectacles and turned to Evelyn Pryor. Miss Pryor, you prepared the lists for tonight, did you not? Evelyn straightened her shoulders. Of course. As secretary, it is my duty. Everything typed, numbered, precise. She produced one from her handbag. The paper was crisp, the columns neat, each lot described in tidy lines. Miss Marple traced her finger down the page. Paintings, goblets, books, war medals. Then she saw them. Small penciled crosses in the margin, 2 only. One beside Lot 1, silver goblets. Another beside Lot 12, scrapbook of village history. She lifted her eyes mildly. How very curious. These marks. Not part of your perfect typing, surely. Evelyn flushed. Certainly not. My programs are clean. Someone else must have made those. Lady Bantry peered over Miss Marple's shoulder. Why mark only 2? Why not more? Dr. Haydock frowned. Lot 1 goblets. Already proved suspicious. Lot 12 scrapbook. What's in it? The auctioneer, still pale, muttered. Photographs. Old captions. Village events. Mr. Grant was particularly interested. Said he would speak on it later. A murmur spread. Mr. Grant had promised revelations. The scrapbook might hold them. Inspector Slack grumbled. Pencil marks prove nothing. Any fool could scribble them. Miss Marple's knitting needles clicked once. Any fool, yes. But not every hand writes the same. These letters, this cross. The line slightly curved, the tail heavy. Distinctive. She folded the sheet carefully, laying it beside the corks. The evidence formed its own quiet row. Lucy Denham shifted uneasily. I copied from that list when placing the lots, but those marks I never noticed. Miss Marple's tone was gentle, perhaps because they were added. Later, my dear. At a time when others were not watching. Slack barked. Enough. Paper scratches. Cork scratches. Fantasy. I need facts. Dr. Haydock's voice cut in. Facts? A man poisoned. A goblet missing. Corks duplicated. And lists altered. Those are facts, Inspector. The villagers whispered again. Evelyn pressed her lips tight. Colin Lyle avoided every gaze, staring hard at the floor. His fingers twitched against his cuff, smearing the grey dust further. Miss Marple gathered her knitting once more, as if nothing troubled her. Yet her eyes lingered on the penciled cross by lot 12. Strange, she said softly, to mark both the glass that killed and the book that might have revealed why. The room fell still. Everyone waited for her next words. Miss Marple looked up, mild as ever. Perhaps, she said. The answer to the murder lies not in the goblet, but in the scrapbook. Colin Lyle stood near the doorway, shoulders tight, eyes fixed on the floorboards. He looked more schoolboy than schoolmaster. Miss Marple tilted her head. Mr. Lyle, perhaps you could tell us where you were at the time of the toast. He cleared his throat. I was checking the lights. The lamps flickered. I thought the fuse might go. I did not wish the auction to be interrupted. Inspector Slack grunted. Sensible precaution, but Marple's eyes softened. So you were not present when Mr. Grant raised his glass. No, Lyle replied quickly. Too quickly. I was at the back, near the stairs. Lady Bantry leaned close to Marple, checking lights during a toast. Odd timing, don't you think? Marple's needles clicked once in reply. Dr. Haydock stepped forward. Show us your hands, Lyle. The schoolmaster hesitated, then held them out. They trembled faintly. On his left cuff, faint grey dust smeared the cloth. Chalk from lessons, or something else. Teaching leaves marks, he muttered. Surely that's no crime. Haydock sniffed. Perhaps not. Yet, I smell wine. He leaned closer, eyes narrowing. A faint splash here. Not chalk. Red. You brushed close to the bottle, didn't you? Lyle's face reddened. I spilled nothing. Children leave me clumsy, that is all. Slack barked. Enough of this nonsense. If the man says chalk, it's chalk. Don't make villains out of school teachers. But the villagers whispered. A teacher near the lights, absent during the toast, with wine stain on his cuff. Too many coincidences. Lucy Denham, timid but insistent, spoke up. I saw him, just before the toast. He passed behind me, going toward the table. He nearly knocked my papers. Lyle spun toward her. That's not true. I was nowhere near the table. Lucy flinched, but her words hung in the air. Evelyn Pryor added coolly. You are forgetful, Colin. You walked past me as well. I wondered where you were heading. His face drained of colour. Perhaps I went nearer than I thought. But I touched nothing. Miss Marple rose slowly. She lifted the duplicate corks once more. You see, Mr. Lyle, knowledge is a dangerous companion. You teach chemistry. You know about powders, residues, substitutions. You know how to handle them without notice. Lyle's lips tightened. Theory. Nothing more. Her gaze lingered on the cuff. The grey dust smeared with faint wine. Not chalk alone. Something powdered. Something brushed. The villagers pressed closer, breath held. Slack scowled, but even he could not silence the stir. Miss Marple laid the corks back down. Her tone was mild, but her words sharp. Perhaps, she said softly, you did not pour the wine, but you may have prepared the glass. The voices swelled again. Speculation, denial, whispered accusations. Inspector Slack barked for silence, but no one listened. Mrs. Ellison, pale and dignified, stood near the hearth. She clutched her handbag tightly, her eyes fixed on the fallen goblet. Miss Marple drifted toward her, quietly, without fuss. You knew Mr. Grant, I think, she said gently. The widow's lips pressed thin. I knew his type. Men who dig, Men who pry into what should be left buried. Buried, Marple repeated, soft as a sigh. Mrs. Ellison's eyes flicked to the villagers crowding near the door. She lowered her voice. Grant came here for more than an auction. He had papers. He claimed to have proof of dealings during the war. Black market schemes. Profiteering. He meant to expose someone. Marple nodded slowly. Exposure can be dangerous. Yes, the widow said bitterly. My husband once stood on a committee with him. Years ago. He ruined friendships with his insistence. People still remember. Lady Bantry had drifted closer, fanning herself lazily. And who, pray, was the target this time? Mrs. Ellison hesitated. Her knuckles whitened on her bag. I cannot say, but he looked directly at Evelyn Pryor during supper, as if he had measured her family's accounts already. Evelyn stiffened. That is slander, Mrs. Ellison. My family has nothing to hide. The widow's eyes narrowed. Perhaps not. But fear makes the hand tremble, and your hand has trembled all night. A sharp murmur spread. Evelyn flushed scarlet, then turned away, lips tight. Inspector Slack groaned. Stories, rumors. Every widow in this village thinks she holds state secrets. But Dr. Haydock's brow furrowed. Not stories, Inspector. If Grant threatened exposure, that gives motive. Lucy whispered, almost to herself. I saw him with a scrapbook. Old photographs. He said the pages would speak louder than he could. He wanted to show it at the end of the auction. Miss Marple's needles paused mid-click. Ah, the scrapbook. Her eyes returned to the auction list with the penciled cross. Lot 12. The very item marked. She looked back at Mrs. Ellison. The widow's expression was weary, yet resolute. Grant enjoyed the law, Miss Marple. He wielded it like a weapon, but even weapons strike back. The room held its breath. The whisper of old scandals had shifted the air. Everyone seemed to eye Evelyn, but no one could be certain. Miss Marple folded her knitting slowly, her mind weighing each word, each glance. She thought quietly. If the scrapbook holds proof, then someone feared its pages more than his voice. The villagers lingered, restless as crows. No one wished to leave. Fear and curiosity bound them to the hall. Miss Marple, quiet as always, moved toward the sideboard. She had noticed Evelyn earlier, slipping a hand into her bag, then withdrawing it in haste. Something small, something folded, had been hidden away. Now beside the stack of unused programs, a scrap of paper lay half-crumpled, torn across the middle. She lifted it gently. The words were typed. The letters faint, the ribbon worn. A few lines only. Abandon these revelations. Some truths, better left buried. Lady Bantry gasped. A warning. Oh, Jane, isn't it thrilling? Marple ignored her. She studied the edge. The tear was uneven, but deliberate, as if half the message had been concealed. Dr. Haydock leaned in. Typed, you see, not handwritten, on an old machine. Look at the letters, he pressed, heavier than the rest. Miss Marple's eyes brightened. Indeed, a very particular fault. I have seen those notices posted on the school door, Mr. Lyle's typewriter. All eyes turned to the schoolmaster. He flushed, stammering. Half the village borrows that machine. Anyone could have written it. Slack growled. So, a warning doesn't mean a murder. Man received a note. He ignored it. Dead anyway. Irrelevant. But Marple shook her head softly. On the contrary, this note shows intent. Someone feared exposure enough to plead with him. When pleading failed, harsher methods followed. Lucy Denham, wide-eyed, whispered, "But who tore it? Where's the rest?" Marple folded the scrap carefully. The missing half would tell us more. Who signed it? Who begged him to keep silent? Evelyn Pryor's voice cut sharply. Speculation again. Perhaps Mr. Grant himself wrote it. He enjoyed melodrama. But her hand trembled as she spoke. The frayed edge of her program, still crushed in her palm, mirrored the tear on the note. Marple saw it. She said nothing, but her eyes softened in quiet recognition. Lady Bantry, never able to keep quiet, declared, if the scrapbook held proof, and someone begged him not to reveal it, well, It all fits rather too neatly, doesn't it? The villagers nodded uneasily. Guilt hung in the air like smoke. Slack snapped. Enough of your novels, Dolly. We've only paper scraps, not gallows ropes. But the murmur would not die. Evelyn pale, Lyle cornered, Lucy nervous. Each name passed from lip to lip. Miss Marple laid the torn scrap beside the duplicate corks and the marked list. Evidence gathered itself in quiet rows. Her needles clicked once, twice, then stilled. She thought, the missing half of this letter may yet point to the hand that poured the poison. The auction room grew colder, though the lamps still burned bright. No one laughed now. Every sound seemed sharp. The scrape of a chair, the clink of glass, the shuffle of uneasy shoes. Dr. Haydock bent over the fallen goblet. He had fetched his small case from the inn's back room, a habit of his always prepared. From a vial he dabbed liquid to the rim. He waited. The clear drop darkened at once. He straightened grimly. As I feared. Alkaloid. Bitter. Fast. This was no accident. Gasps rippled. Lucy clasped her hands, eyes brimming. But it was wine, Doctor. I poured some myself. Surely it was only wine. Haydock shook his head. No, the poison wasn't in the bottle. It was on the glass. Miss Marple nodded softly. Brushed along the rim. Enough to pass unseen in lamplight. But when lips touched, the fate was sealed. Inspector Slack scowled. Brushed. Rim. You imagine too much, madam. If poison were present, it would mix. It would taint the whole bottle. Marple's needles clicked once. Not if applied after pouring, Inspector. A clever hand prepared one glass only. The others remained safe. Mr. Grant's was chosen. She turned the goblet gently in her hand. The silver shone too bright, as though polished more than the rest. Her fingers caught a faint, grainy edge. Powder still clung there. Lady Bantry whispered, thrilled despite herself. How neat. How dreadful. The villagers whispered louder. Whose hand had touched the goblet? Whose hand had brushed the rim? Evelyn Pryor spoke suddenly, her tone sharp. You accuse without proof. Anyone might have brushed a cloth across it while cleaning. Marple's eyes softened. Indeed, Miss Pryor. But why would anyone polish only one goblet? And why mark it with a cross on the program? Evelyn said nothing. Her face stiffened, eyes fixed straight ahead. Haydock closed his case. The poison acts quickly. Death in moments. Whoever placed it there knew exactly what they were doing. Slack snapped. Speculation. We need facts. Witnesses. Not fairy tales about brushes and rims. Lucy trembled. But I saw Mr. Lyle near the table. He could have touched it. Perhaps while I looked away. Lyle bristled. I touched nothing. Chalk dust stains, not poison. But his voice cracked, and the villagers heard it. Suspicion deepened like a spreading shadow. Miss Marple replaced the goblet gently. Her needles rested in her lap, silent now. Her gaze moved from the rim to the torn paper, to the duplicate corks, to the list of lots. Each clue lay quiet, yet together they spoke. She thought, a single glass was chosen. The hand that chose it will soon betray itself. Lucy Denham stood near the wall, twisting her apron. Her eyes were red from near tears. She looked very young in the heavy silence. Miss Marple beckoned kindly. Lucy, dear, you polished the goblets. Where did you keep your cloths and brushes? Lucy hesitated, then pointed to a wooden box on a side chair. There. I brought it from home. Mother says, proper polishing needs proper tools. Inspector Slack snorted. Tools, eh? More like excuses. But Marple ignored him. She lifted the box carefully. Its lid bore scratches from long use. Inside lay soft rags, a worn brush, and a tin of powder. Polish? She asked. Yes, Miss Marple. For silver. Harmless. I've used it many times. Dr. Haydock leaned closer, dipping a finger. Odd texture. Not the usual chalk paste. This feels finer, like ground crystals. Lucy shook her head frantically. It's only polish, I swear it. Bought at the shop in town. Nothing else. Marple spread a rag across her lap. She tapped the tin gently, a faint puff rose, hanging in the lamplight. She pinched some between her fingers. Smooth, powdery, too smooth. Lady Bantry, watching with wide eyes, whispered, "It looks like face powder, or medicine ground fine." The villagers edged closer. Suspicion shifted like wind. Lucy's voice broke. "I didn't put anything in it. Someone must have touched my box. I left it on the chair while I fetched water. Anyone could have," Evelyn Pryor interrupted coolly. "A convenient excuse. Leave a box open, then claim innocence when it's used for murder." Lucy gasped. "No, I only wanted the goblets to shine. Mr. Grant even said they gleamed too much." He laughed. Marple's eyes sharpened. He noticed, did he? That makes sense, for one was polished differently, brushed more than the rest, brushed to hide a powder on the rim. Inspector Slack groaned. "We're chasing rags and polished tins now? What next, accusing the innkeeper's broom?" But Dr. Haydock lifted the tin again, his face grim. "This is no ordinary polish. Even a trace could carry poison if mixed. The question is who tampered with it?" Lucy covered her face, sobbing. "Not me. I would never." Miss Marple closed the box gently, laying her hand over it like a blessing. "Perhaps not, child. But your tools provided the stage. Another hand may have written the script." The villagers whispered louder. Some eyes turned toward Lucy with pity, others with suspicion. A girl's tears often swayed less than a widow's dignity or a teacher's denial. Marple placed the box beside the goblet and corks. Evidence continued to gather. Each piece waited for the pattern to reveal itself. She thought, if the polish was touched, then the murderer left a trace behind, and that trace will point to the truth. The room remained heavy with whispers. Lucy sobbed quietly into her apron. Evelyn sat stiff, her hands clenched tight. Colin Lyle kept his gaze on the floor. Miss Marple rose again, moving to the fallen goblet. She lifted it carefully, tilting it under the lamp. The rim gleamed, but faint discoloration lingered. Green. Dr. Haydock leaned close. "Yes, I noticed on his lips. A tinge of green. Some alkaloids leave it. Metallic, perhaps." Marple nodded. "And look here. The stain clings to the silver, but not to the wine itself. It was brushed on, a coating. Enough to kill in one sip." Inspector Slack folded his arms. "Green or red, stain or no, it proves nothing. Just wine gone sour." But Marple's eyes twinkled. "Wine seldom stains silver green, Inspector." Lady Bantry clapped her hands once, excited. "Jane, you're right. I saw it too. When the goblet rolled, the light caught a dull shine, not pure silver." Marple set the goblet down and turned to the corks. She picked up the false one again. Along its side, faint green wax clung in streaks. Not much, but enough to glisten in the lamplight. "Interesting," she murmured. Haydock frowned. "Sealed with something false. Wax softened, capsule resealed. Someone hollowed, inserted powder, then closed. It as though untouched." Evelyn spoke sharply. "Anyone with a candle could melt wax. It proves nothing against me or against Mr. Lyle." Her voice was too quick, too defensive. Marple placed the cork on the table beside the goblet. "It proves only this, that care was taken. A careful hand. A patient hand. Someone who understood both appearance and effect." Slack growled. "Which means half this village, if you ask me. We all know how to melt wax. We all know polish. You'd hang every one of us." But his protest fell flat. The villagers had seen Evelyn's trembling. They had seen Lyle's dusted cuffs. They had seen Lucy's tears. Suspicion thickened. Marple picked up her knitting again, though the needles barely moved. Murder, Inspector, is rarely clumsy. It requires skill and motive both. The green wax tells us one thing: the plan was prepared long before tonight. The room quieted. Everyone seemed to hear their own breath. Lady Bantry whispered, almost gleeful, "So clever, so dreadful. Who would plan so far ahead?" Marple's eyes swept the room, resting briefly on Lyle, then Evelyn. Both avoided her gaze. She thought, only a teacher's patient hand, or a secretary's precise one, could have sealed this fate. The Blue Boar Inn had grown restless. The villagers no longer whispered. They spoke openly now, voices edged with fear and blame. It must have been the girl, one man said, nodding toward Lucy. She handled the goblets. No, Mrs. Ellison snapped. Lucy is foolish, not wicked. The secretary, she trembles because she knows more than she says. Evelyn Pryor sat straighter, face pale but proud. Idle talk will not convict me. My duty is to serve, not to kill. But her words rang hollow. The program in her hands was crushed almost beyond recognition. Colin Lyle shifted uneasily near the wall. This is madness. Notes, stains, corks. These are theories. Nothing more. Miss Marple looked up from her knitting. Her needles clicked softly, steady against the storm of voices. Theories, Mr. Lyle, often begin with patterns, and patterns tell stories, whether we wish them or not. Inspector Slack pounded the table with his fist. Enough. I'll not have this turned into a village circus. I'll question one by one, in order, and settle the matter properly. Dr. Haydock's voice cut across him. Settle? When poison clings to glass, when corks are duplicated, when wax glows green, evidence speaks, Inspector, whether you wish to hear it or not. Slack flushed red, but he could not silence the room. Lucy stepped forward, voice trembling. Please, Miss Marple, you believe me, don't you? I never touched the wine. I only polished what I was told. If someone brushed poison on the goblet, it was after me. Marple's eyes softened. I believe you, my dear. Tears are easy, yes, but fear this deep rarely feigns. Evelyn's eyes flashed. Sympathy blinds you. Anyone can claim innocence. Yet the goblet gleamed too bright, too carefully done. Marple regarded her calmly. Perhaps, but trembling hands rarely polish with precision. Someone else brushed that rim. Someone patient, someone prepared. The villagers muttered again. Some turned toward Evelyn, others toward Lyle. His cuffs still bore dust and stain, and every eye saw it. Why not him? Lady Bantry said aloud, fanning herself. A teacher knows how to measure, how to plan. And his typewriter made the warning note. Admit it, Colin, it looks grim. Lyle's voice cracked. Enough. Yes. I wrote the note, but only to dissuade him. He meant to slander my father's name. I begged him to stop. That is all. A sharp silence fell. The villagers gasped. Slack leaned forward triumphantly. Miss Marple did not blink. She folded her knitting. So you admit fear, Mr. Lyle. And fear breeds desperate acts, she thought. But if he begged with words, whose hand spoke with poison? The villagers gathered tighter around the long table. No one tried to leave now. Fear and curiosity bound them like iron chains. Miss Marple rose from her chair. Her knitting lay folded beside the goblet, the corks, and the torn note. She cleared her throat softly. My friends, it is time to draw the pattern together. Inspector Slack rolled his eyes. Oh, here we go. Tales and theories again. But Dr. Haydock gestured sharply. Silence, Inspector. Let her speak. The room hushed. Miss Marple pointed to the goblet. This was no random death. The poison was brushed on the rim. Only one glass was chosen. The duplicate cork proves a bottle was tampered with, and the penciled marks on the list, those marks singled out both the goblet and the scrapbook. Murmurs rose. She continued, calm and steady. Someone feared what Mr. Grant meant to reveal. Someone prepared long before tonight. A patient hand polished, sealed, and planned. That hand raised no weapon, but it killed all the same. Evelyn Pryor shot to her feet. You accuse me because I type programs? Because I carry bottles? Absurd. You ignore the truth that man, she pointed at Lyle, admits writing the warning note. He is guilty. All eyes turned to the schoolmaster, his face flushed crimson. He opened his mouth, then shut it again. At last he spoke. Yes, I wrote the note. I feared Grant's words. He meant to disgrace my father, to drag our family through the mud. I begged him to stop, but I swear I never touched the wine. The room buzzed. Lady Bantry whispered gleefully, Oh, Jane, it's delicious. A note, a cork, a stain. So many threads. But Marple's gaze never wavered. You see, Colin, your plea was desperate but not fatal. You used words, but another used poison, and that difference is everything. Lyle sank back, defeated. Then who? Marple's eyes swept the room. Consider the polished tin. Lucy swears she left it unattended. Someone could have slipped powder within, brushing it onto the rim under guise of cleaning. But who would think of such a method? A girl eager to please, or a mind trained in precision? The villagers stirred. All eyes turned to Evelyn once more. Her face tightened, color draining. This is slander. I served faithfully. I poured. Yes, but only to help. Marple's voice remained mild. And in pouring, you chose his glass. The marked goblet. The prepared rim. Evelyn's hand shook violently now. She dropped her ruined program to the floor. Miss Marple said softly, "No, Mr. Lyle did not poison him. The hand that poured the fatal glass was yours, Miss Pryor." The room froze. Every whisper died. Only the crackle of the inn's hearth remained. Evelyn Pryor stood rigid. Her lips parted, but no sound came. Her eyes darted left-right, searching for rescue, finding none. Inspector Slack barked, "Well, miss, speak up. Did you poison him or not?" Evelyn drew a shuddering breath. "I know. I only poured. It was not me." Miss Marple's voice was calm. "But you poured the glass marked with a cross. You carried the bottle tampered with a false cork. You polished the goblet once more after Lucy's work, and you trembled because you feared what Mr. Grunt would reveal." Evelyn's face crumpled. Her voice broke. "He would have ruined us. My father during the war took supplies meant for soldiers. Sold them on the black market. Grunt kept records. He told me tonight he would show the scrapbook, that it proved everything." Gasps filled the room. Mrs. Ellison whispered fiercely, "I knew it. I knew secrets hid beneath her neat skirts." Evelyn's eyes flashed with sudden anger. "Do you understand what disgrace means? My father's name, my family, all destroyed because one man could not leave the past alone." Dr. Haydock said grimly, "And for that you brushed death upon his glass?" Tears streaked Evelyn's face. "I did not mean for it to be so swift, only to stop him speaking, only to keep silence." Slack folded his arms triumphantly. "So you admit it? You murdered him?" But Marple shook her head. "No, Inspector. Murder is more than admission. It is proof. And the proof lies in the very thing she tried to hide." She lifted the auction list. 2 crosses, one by the goblet, one by the scrapbook. She marked what would kill him and what would condemn her. Both must vanish. Evelyn sagged against the table. "I planned to burn the scrapbook after. No one would know." "No one," Lady Bantry whispered, half thrilled, half horrified. "So neat, so cold." Marple's gaze softened. Not cold, Dolly. Desperate. Pride and fear together. A dangerous mixture. Evelyn covered her face with her hands. "I only wanted to protect what little honor we had left." The villagers stared, some with pity, most with condemnation. A secretary's calm facade had cracked to reveal ruin. Slack stepped forward, snapping out the words. "Evelyn Pryor, you'll answer for this in court." Miss Marple looked down at the scrapbook waiting on the table. But first, she thought, the past must speak its last word. The inn had grown strangely quiet. The excitement had drained, leaving only weariness. Villagers shifted, not daring to meet one another's eyes. Inspector Slack stood stiffly, arms crossed, while 2 constables led Evelyn Pryor away. She walked without protest, head bowed, program still clutched in her hand. The torn paper fluttered once, then dropped to the floor. Lady Bantry sighed, sinking into a chair. What a dreadful evening. And all meant to raise money for charity. Mrs. Ellison pressed her lips tight. Charity is thin when pride rots beneath it. Lucy wept openly now, face buried in her hands. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. I only wanted everything to look bright." Miss Marple touched her shoulder gently. "You did your best, my dear. The brightness you gave was harmless." But another hand turned brightness into a weapon. Dr. Haydock packed away his instruments, muttering. Poison brushed neat as polish, cold, deliberate. "I've seen soldiers die slower deaths. Slack grunted. Another case solved. Another villain caught. Nothing more to say. But Marple's eyes twinkled faintly. There is always more to say, Inspector. The method shows skill, yes, but the motive reveals the heart. He frowned. Motive? She admitted it. Fear of disgrace. Marple's needles clicked softly, steady again. Yes, pride wounded, fear sharpened, a dangerous pairing. Many crimes grow from greed, but the cruelest grow from shame. The villagers listened in uneasy silence. They had known Evelyn as precise, efficient, dependable. To see her led away as a murderer unsettled them more deeply than the death itself. Lady Bantry broke the silence with a nervous laugh. Well, Jane, you must admit it was thrilling. Better than any London play. Marple smiled faintly. Plays end with applause. Life ends with sorrow. Remember that, Dolly. The fire crackled. The stained goblet still lay on the table, a grim reminder of the toast that had silenced the hall. The scrapbook remained unopened, its pages heavy with secrets. Marple reached out, closing it gently. The past cannot be erased by polishing silver or sealing corks. It waits, patient as ever, until someone dares to lift the lid. Lucy whispered, "Will things ever feel the same here?" Marple's smile was kind but sad. Villages heal, child. Yet the memory will linger, as faint as a stain on silver. Scrub as you might, it will gleam differently forever. The constable's footsteps faded down the corridor. The villagers gathered their coats, moving slowly, as if afraid of what shadows waited outside. Miss Marple folded her knitting into her bag. She rose, small and steady, and looked around the emptying room. She thought, murder grows not in darkness, but in silence, and silence is never truly safe.